can't be dead, Jonathan. Everything depends on him.
I don't understand.
Austin's the only one who knows I didn't kill that girl. He knows the whole story.
What are you talking about?
He was in on the whole thing from the beginning. We planted all the evidence together.
We find the defendant guilty.
Hello, all you beautiful people out there. Thank you for joining us today again for another episode of the Film Fetishist Podcast. I am Bryan. This is Justin and Dahlia. Today we are going to talk about the film Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, released in 1956, directed by Fritz Lang. We want to connect it to true crime magazines. We kind of delve through the depths of the internet to kind of find like authentic true crime magazines that we felt had some sort of connection to the film and kind of noir in general. And so how about Justin? How about you start us off right now?
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Bryan. This is my example that I brought. Basically, it's an example of how sensationalized noir, true crime magazines are, and how that, in my opinion, is kind of a dangerous strategy to take when you're dealing with such sensitive topics as, like, you know, the murder of like a family or the murder of someone's wife in this case. And what it does is it disregards actual evidence and proof, and it, like, in favor of a good story. And then the equivalent to that in the movie is in the scene where the prosecutor and the detective are having a discussion about the political ramifications of Tom Garrett actually being innocent. And what I want to focus on in that scene is how the prosecutor is not looking to uncover the truth in the matter, as, you know, kind of like ethically he should be looking, and how, as like we're taught, the courts are supposed to work. Like, the prosecutor's job is not to get a conviction. The prosecutor's job is to get a conviction using the evidence that is available. And if there's counter evidence, like, it's you know, he's not supposed to withhold it. Like, we're not, you know, his mission in this is to win, and it's like a personal battle. And instead of it being a fight for justice, instead of it being like, let's see who actually committed this crime, which is, like, when you have a tragedy like this, what really, you know, like in what ethically should be the position to be taken. And then, like, that kind of relates back to these magazines, because these magazines have the exact same attitude, but they're given the power of not even having to have any evidence, because they can print whatever the hell they want, and they can put whoever's name in it they want, and it becomes this really dangerous, like, it becomes this like dangerous dynamic where they could potentially print, like, accuse someone of murder who is innocent and ruin their life, because you can't really, you know, you can't kill someone and have a job. And we see this now more nowadays, with, like, you know, Twitter and whatever, or like take, you know, Carol Baskin, you know, people think she killed someone and now she's like sent death threats, and like, I'm not, you know, I'm not making a stance as to whether she actually did, but like, she's getting death threats and she's getting harassed online and in person, and it's because of a true crime documentary. And then, like, I'm sure that still was the case back when these magazines were popular. Like, if someone got away with murder, like, and you know, the only proof is like that, like, you know, we know that they actually killed this person. You know, if like you have like kind of a more like lower grade OJ Simpson case, like, in a true crime magazine, that it they have this power to essentially destroy someone's life, and they don't have any checks and balances in it. And I guess I should also read the specific thing that I was pointing to. So basically, in this little excerpt here, along with the photos, they talk about like the body where Joseph Jung found the body of his wife Margaret when he returned to the farm after delivering milk. She had been beaten to death by more than a dozen blows of a heavy wrench. And it's like we're including this little detail of returning to the farm after delivering milk, which, you know, is clearly made to like sensationalize it and make it kind of this like you're going about your daily business as something tragic happens, which is a trope of noir, and then beaten with like dozens of hits with a wrench, which it's like the one detail that's like actually, you know, kind of pertinent to kind of the analysis of the crime scene is
it's sort of like
glossed over and summarized with dozens.
And it's strange how it kind of like juxtaposes like this sort of like the mundane, you know, went away, came back after delivering milk, then bam, beaten to death by like a bunch of just being it's sort of that kind of very noir sort of.
And you have like next to, you have this unsuspicion, which is a big trope of noir, and this like kind of storytelling element that looks like noir, put right next to like this like disregard and kind of carelessness with the facts in something that should be factually based, because they want to be taken seriously. They take themselves seriously.
I mean, kind of like along the same point that Bryan was making about like how noir this whole story kind of is. I think that I really agree with like the point that you're making about like how these magazines can be like irresponsible in a sense, in the same way that like TikTok detectives are very like irresponsible. Well, like as a generation, we're all very like excited about the fact that these people are like solving these murders and like putting people in jail. There's also that sense that's like there's a possibility that they could be wrong. They're not trained professionals. These are just people who took up a case file and started looking at it and were like, hey, this looks interesting. Well, I do like true crime, and I think that like true crime detectives have done a lot in general. I think that like these little aspects are what make it a little faulty. You know?
Yeah, I sort of agree. I think noir in a sense kind of like demonstrates that kind of danger. Like time after time we see like the main protagonist, usually main protagonist, is like mistakenly thought to be the murderer or the killer or the thief or whoever, when we know it's not true, but then like everyone around them kind of comes to that same conclusion. Even in this film, like Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, we have like we see how like is it Susan Spencer kind of like contacts the press and they get this idea out that her husband is innocent. And then like everyone gets like kind of like swept up in this. All the common people, they kind of get swept up with this idea, and they kind of like go out and they make their own conclusion that he's that the main character did not in fact commit this crime. When it's revealed, I mean, even based on the evidence in the film, like when you looked at the trial, it looks really like solid did it, even though we think he didn't do it. But then in the end, it's revealed that he did do it. He did commit this crime. He did murder her. So like even then, it kind of shows the danger of being caught up in this sort of emotionally driven kind of armchair detective.
Kind of like along the point that you were making, Bryan, about like the armchair detective. I really agree with like that these true crime detectives and these magazines get very emotional. Like they insert themselves and like on like a personal level into these cases, and you know that can be like very dangerous. And I feel like we see that a lot in noir, where like these detectives are inserting themselves, like their personal lives and everything, right, in their emotions into these cases, which they obviously shouldn't be doing, but they are doing.
Actually, the Susan, like in the film, she kind of like shows kind of the dangers of like being like kind of in this emotional position where she's not sure if she should believe her husband when he says he didn't kill this other woman or if she shouldn't. It's just, I don't know. I think there's a good connection there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I also think like with true crime magazines, compared to like police investigations are supposed to eliminate this bias that they have, this and they're supposed to do that by taking people with conflicts of interest off of cases. So you're not going to investigate the case of your wife's murder because that's just not allowed. And then, but like true crime magazines, and like these stories, like stories of true crime, thrive when the storyteller and the writer is extremely emotionally invested, is like making it their life's mission and becomes obsessed with this. Like that's because then the best investigations come forth. And then we see the closest analysis and we actually get a solution to the crime. But it's like you're doing this without checks and balances. So you're doing this with like someone who just wants kind of the story to end, and it's like an inappropriate lust for glory, but these writers, they want a good successful money-making story instead of instead of bring justice, but like I would say that the responsibility then falls on them because they are also trying to juggle being an entertainment source that isn't meant to be like justice, isn't meant to be like, some sort of vigilante thing. And they're also trying to solve and lead to like they're, give the police information on a case. So it's like they're taking what they want. They're taking like the parts of the police of the police's job that they want to have. And then in the movie, like they go like the movie itself tricks the audience, I think, more than most noir movies. Like I'd say I was pretty surprised at the result. And then you like that's so that's like the I think that this movie is unique because it is actually trying to sell the fact that he is innocent and like being proven as guilty up until the point where they turn around and like actually like if you really think about it, this evidence was probably real. There's this evidence that he left behind was probably not planted. Like it was probably real because he actually did the murder. Like there's a certain element of it that was planted, but like it would have been lost as to what evidence was really from him and what evidence was put there to kind of put him there.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever be able to figure that out. So I don't know if there's a point in speculating on that though.
Yeah, well, but like the point is that like it's the movie wants to convince us that he's innocent
Sure.
at first.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
the way that it tells the story is like we can believe that, we can believe the intention of the story because it's not supposed to cue us into the twist.
But yeah, no, it's kind of strange for noir to kind of trick us like that. Like, especially like if usually like, noir shows a crime that we usually can't see in the world. We're kind of crossing that hermetic seal into it, and we're kind of clued into this criminal world. So it's kind of weird that the main character actually doesn't like tell us, or not like tell us, but that we don't know that the main character actually did commit the crime. I don't know. It's weird, I feel like.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is like as a noir, like in terms of noir movies, Beyond a Shadow of a Doubt is really different.
Beyond a Reasonable Doubt?
Oh, Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. It's different because it's not an analysis of the oh wait, no, I'm totally saying the fucking wrong thing. But yeah, no, I think that's interesting because Beyond a Reasonable Doubt is like really not, it's not like other noir movies because we are shocked. And even us, like I talked about this in an earlier episode, that we should look at this with the perspective of the like viewer, like the viewer in the moment's mind, like not with someone who has analyzed these, because that's who we are. And then like, but this movie tricked us as well. And so I think that is what makes that's why it's like more of a it's a good example of a film to use in like true crime, because it tricks us into thinking something, like into bringing a wrong conclusion, drawing a wrong conclusion
that's
about
a
a
good point.
crime, and then it turns around and is like, oh, actually,
It makes us sort of reanalyze like the sort of like
yeah,
the
yeah.
crime itself.
And it's like,
a lot of
if this was real, it would be like they knew all along, but they told us something that was not true in order to make the money from the film. And then like that is easily applied to these true crime things that like don't use evidence. It's like we're told to disregard evidence in this movie, and then we see examples of evidence being disregarded. But if the evidence hadn't been disregarded, like there wouldn't have been this whole fuss of getting the right person off of death row and then back onto death row. Of the time, nowadays death row is a big topic, but like in the time, it's like, are you going to execute him or are you not?
The point that I actually wanted to bring up was when I was looking through for true crime magazines, I found this one about Murder on a Lazy Sunday. It's basically about the police in LaPorte, Indiana, and how they're determined to crack a case. And I definitely thought that like this like translates back to the movie in the sense that translates back to noir in the sense that like there's a lot of these hard-boiled detectives who are determined to solve the case. And like for true crime in general, I think that it's like a fetishization of true crime, like crime in general, because like these cops were very much on the case and wanted to solve the murder, and then true crime experts, obviously from across America, were reading this and trying to solve the mystery along with them. And I think that like that fetishization of like crime is really seen in the film, and I think connects back to my point at the end, when he's in the closing scene when he's waiting in his cell pending his execution. And I really think that that's like a big fetishization of crime and like true crime in general, because we see with like these true crime TikTokers now these days that it's very much a trend to try and solve a mystery. Like they wanted to try to solve the Gabby Potato case, or they wanted to try to solve the Jonah B. Ramsey case, or they wanted to solve the Zodiac killer. They're like they're very much aiming high, and it's like to the detriment of like themselves, and I think it's to the detriment of society, because going back to like Justin's point about like how they could like accuse these innocent people, it's very much a real like problem.
Yeah. And I think like you're really onto something with your with the fetishization side of things, because that is just like exactly what we see in noir. So like not only do we see this trope both reflected in these magazines, particularly this, an excellent example of is what you brought to us, but we also see it in like the film we watched and like the genre, because it's sometimes you get lost in the film that you most recently watched and forget about the genre as a whole. But this, it's appropriate in noir is what I would argue. It's appropriate because even if it's based on a true story, which they're, from my understanding, often they are not based on true stories. Like I think that because it's a dramatization and is not trying to pass as something real, like it's not like disrespectful to the dead. It's not also putting other people in harm's way, because it's using people that it's using actors, and everyone understands that. And then like you have that contrast to like essentially the documentary version of a noir, which winds up in which like it's like not self-aware of its own limitations, its own like ethical limitations. And so I think we're all kind of coming back to the same point of like these magazines are very unaware. They don't understand why what they're doing is harmful and potentially dangerous.
Yeah, well, I think there's a certain danger when it's like, so you watch a film noir, you know that's like a fictional kind of occurrence, but when you look at something like true crime, it's you're given a narrative to like true life things that you don't know, you don't 100% know what the actual story is. And when you do that, that's kind of a dangerous kind of rabbit hole to go down. Because if you, especially when you don't, if there isn't always, like it's they don't always find the legitimate
Mhm.
are like the committer of the crime. So if you present a story to an audience that doesn't have an ending, they're going to instinctively try to fill in that gap in the story. So like along the lines of like how both of the like true crime and film noir kind of like fetishize crime, like film noir like brings us kind of into the world of crime and allows us to kind of like occupy that space. And so like true crime is kind of fetishizes the solving of crime, where I think like film noir, like, you look at something like Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, it sort of fetishizes like this idea of manipulating like the criminal world and manipulating the police in a sense. I think they're both like fetishizing different aspects of crime to a degree, because like film noir, you're kind of deeply involved in the crime.
I think that actually with Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, we can see like the fetishization of the crime, like of like solving the crime, because at the end, the viewers are kind of satisfied knowing that, Garrett is in jail, like about to die. And I think that that's
Yeah.
something that like a lot of true crime fetishists like to see, like that the satisfaction that they've solved the case. And this is kind of like that's kind of like how I feel like it relates back to like my point about like the fetishization of true crime.
Yeah, it's more, I'd say it's less of like, it's more broad than just a fetishization of true crime. I'd say it's a fetishization of justice. Like it's people, because we are thirsty for justice, and especially like violent justice in a way. Like we want, we want those who like brutally kill other people in ways like these these murders are described kind of in graphic detail, but in graphic detail for people who can't actually take real graphic detail.
I just have a question for you guys. So like we talked about it's sort of like the satisfaction, like solving the crime. And so we've talked about the sort of like the kind of like classical detective, like the kind of Sherlock Holmes detective. And so I feel like that's a different sort of satisfaction. But like, where do you guys think those two things differ? Like in terms of each other?
It's an intellectual satisfaction as opposed to a judicial satisfaction, where Sherlock Holmes is, we're satisfied by seeing we're satisfied by seeing someone brilliantly like put together things that we would never think to put together, but then when it's explained to us, it makes complete sense. So it's like we in a way feel like we're that character. We feel like we've drawn that conclusion on our own because we understand it, and it's like we understand something that everyone else doesn't. And then with noir is less focused on kind of making everything like intellectually perfect, and so you're left with a different sort of like feeding of our
where do
like,
you see that
desire.
like where do you see that like in Beyond a Reasonable Doubt? Just like if you have some,
Well, it's where I see it, I think Beyond Reasonable Doubt is like almost a little too good to properly analyze or represent all of noir, like too thought out. But like I think that our like you said, in the end, our satisfaction is not that we figured it out, it's that he is getting what he deserves.
He's getting the crime, like the punishment.
Exactly.
And so it's not grounded in the intellectual journey of discovery, whereas
so like in the film
it
itself,
doesn't rely on that.
If Susan and like the other detective she's with, like we towards the end of the film, we find out that he actually did commit the crime when he reveals the woman's actual name. How would he have known that? So at that point we know he did it, but we're not satisfied until like Susan and the other detective actually reveal that information to the police and he gets punished.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so like we could, it's I think the perfect way to understand it is like if he wasn't brought to justice, but we had still figured it out, we would be kind of like completely unsatisfied. And like if it were kind of like, yes, we would still be unsatisfied with Sherlock, but like if we had been brought on this intellectual journey and like made to understand something other people don't understand, I feel like we would have more satisfaction and we would feel more enlightened, like even if we didn't catch the killer, than in one of these noir examples.
Yeah,
Does that? Yeah. Sorry, I was done.
No, you're fine. I definitely like agree with that, and I actually think that that's a perfect note for us to like end like this conversation of fetishization on, because I like a good, really good transition to like what Brian wants to talk about right now.
All right, I can talk. Wait, just cut this part right here. But am
Yeah,
I
of course.
just sending it to you guys, or am I like
Just put in the Zoom.
So I kind of just want to bring up my media, and I'm again a different kind of true crime magazine or comic like from the time. And there's these two stories. If you look at the bottom left of this image, I'll just read out the first one that I kind of want to talk about to you real quickly. So here, I'll just say it now. The guarded train sped Lisbeth toward the city where her testimony would convict her kill crazy ex-boyfriend. But suddenly, in broad daylight, Lisbeth, the guards, and the whole train disappeared. Just one of the 18 complete stories in Ellery, though that part's not important. But this one, this moment right here, I have two stories to talk about, but I want to talk about this one real quick. That moment where like everyone on the train disappeared. We talked about it before. In the class, we talked about intention, where like things in film noir, they flip to one thing and they flip to another in the end. Like in tension, it's like revealed that it's like told to the audience that like this whole room has been all the
double cross.
all the furniture's been changed, but that all the furniture's been changed, and so like this woman is convicted no matter what. But then it's revealed again, we didn't actually change the furniture. So it's things changing to the audience, and then like kind of
it's like the double cross. Isn't that
exactly? Yeah, that core concept
Exactly.
of the double cross. And like we see it in Beyond a Reasonable Doubt in the end, where it's turned out, oh, this guy who we thought was innocent this whole time is then made to look like he isn't innocent, and then it's so like he's made to look like he's innocent, and it's revealed to the not to the audience per se, but to the other characters in the film that he is innocent, and we really
the audience
think that the whole time. But then it's revealed to everyone again that he actually wasn't innocent, and so just this story right here, I feel like I think our professor talked about it before, like Beyond a Reasonable Doubt takes that idea of like the double cross to like an extreme where it's kind of like unbelievable. I don't know. I just felt like this moment right here where everyone on the train disappeared kind of connects that idea of just like everything we know just vanishing, but to a degree where it makes no sense in the slightest. And I think just another idea of like true crime showing out how true crime and film noir are connected in a sense. That story didn't have as much to say about. It's actually the one below that I want to spend a bit more time on. If I can just switch to that one real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim Russell flew to Panama to find his friend Max, but instead he found himself hunted by the cops, the underworld, and three desperately dangerous women. Max had been murdered. Jim had nowhere to turn. The only person with all the answers was one of the three women, but she had a gun that would talk before she did. This, if we look at the story of Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, and we look at the character of Austin Spencer, he's a newspaper publisher, yes. Austin Spencer, newspaper publisher, he has the information that reveals that our main character is innocent, Tom Garrett, that he's innocent. But of course, when he has the information, he goes to do it, he gets hit by a car and he dies. Like, of course. And I think if you look at the story, like this true crime story that's supposed to be based on like real fact, I think you kind of see the kind of stories that if true crime is connected to film noir, and if film noir was influenced by true crime, I think these are the kind of stories that film noir like creators saw and kind of like took these sort of stories where like nothing is exactly what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
These sensationalized stories where like one thing is just off.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's like the double cross situation. Like definitely, it's always something that's happened, and then it always has some unexpected turn, which ends up the innocent person being the one who ended up being the who ended up being the criminal in the end, just like in Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. It's like it creates this false sense of trust that kind of relates back to like immorality in the film and like in this case in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think like noir is so intent on finding like stories and true crime that that are stories, essentially, not just crime as it is, but crime with this sort of like a plot like element to it, like these three women,
Yeah.
and one of them happens to have the information, but she has a gun too.
Yeah, and I think that like where they're similar is certainly in like this formula type thing, and then that's why it becomes so bizarre because true crime is like culturally seen as factual. Like
Yeah.
we don't see it as kind of this like bullshit, tabloid type thing.
Especially, we've discussed it before in like class, like crime magazines back then, we don't know if they were actually like telling the truth at all. Like these weren't like actual cases put out into the world, like with the police validation. Like these are just, in a sense, they could just be stories given kind of this true crime mystique to it. And I think that's
And you mentioned
that we like.
And you mentioned this too, but like they're withholding information just like in noir and in this movie, like, and like noir itself withholds information from the viewer in order to give it to them later for it to have to be more effective as a plot device. And then here we see like, Jim had nowhere to turn, and the only person with all the answers was one of the three women, but she had the gun that would talk before she did.
Exactly.
And it's like they clearly know the answer when they're writing the story, but they're trying to lure you in. And so it's like, but it's like then you're stuck in this situation where you have a real person that has died, and it is
and that's the difference between the two. Like film noir, like you go in knowing that's fictional, but true crime is giving a story to crime.
And it's put into a formula. It's like taking real tragedy and putting it into a formula, whereas noir is taking creativity and putting it into a formula.
Yeah, exactly. I think that like now with like the commercialization of like true crime, it's become more of like an entertainment in the same way that film noir was. Like these people want to be noir detectives, but obviously noir is false and this is reality.
Oh yeah, it's like
they both play on this idea of like taking like us common folks and giving us this lens into crime and kind of involving ourselves in it from a distance, but we're still sort of involved in it.
It's all
on that. But there's a bit more like kind of, I think we talked about it a lot, but like there's a bit more danger in doing that with true crime.
And it's almost like trying to make crime into a spectator sport. Like
exactly, yeah.
And then they also like border on giving you the keys to getting away with crimes, which I know it wouldn't work, but I would argue that like they actually kind of encourage criminal behavior. And then like compare that to noir where it's not based in reality in a sense, and a lot of the behaviors and a lot of the responses aren't necessarily realistic, so you don't have the risk of being a bad influence as your on your viewers. Your viewers are not nearly as impressionable if you're writing a noir film than if you're writing a true crime magazine or documentary.
No, that's a really good point. I think it's just, true crime tells the audience that like this is real, and you can buy into this. We're not lying about anything. Like this is the truth. You can buy into it.
Yeah. Well,
you can be.
Well,
do you want to wrap it up?
On the comment of luring you in, we're going to lure you in for next week's podcast because unfortunately we must go now. So sad.
Run out.
Time has run out. We will see you next week.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. And bye.
Goodbye.
Next time. Bye, everybody. I love you.
Bryan, you have to wave. Required.
Okay, so the big question we always gotta think about. We're always thinking about it. Who has a fetish? I think I have one. It's the lightsaber.
Go right ahead, Bryan.
Okay, so we all know Austin Spencer, the news publisher, and his, he says that he wants to prove that the death penalty shouldn't be in place because he's all about like, oh, you can put an innocent person and they could be seen as guilty, whatever. I don't think that's why he's really doing this whole fake a crime thing. I think that's because he likes it. I think he likes this idea of like, lying to the police and setting up this whole fake conspiracy. I think he likes the power and he likes the thrill,
And he likes watching people be confused because on his account.
I agree.
Exactly.
Likes it a lot.
Oh my God, that's the finish. Is that our finish for the week?
Well, do you have anything else? Do we have anything else?
No, that's the only finish I actually thought of. Brian
That's a good finish.
Brian stole the show.
Oh, true. Yeah. Well, who knows?
Any other fetishes?
Clearly, Brian has a
Got
fetish
nothing.
saying the word
All
Anyway,
right. Well,
thank
thank
you.
you. We will see you next week.
Bye.